Hello, welcome to another video, and today is just a quick one looking at why I don't like to use exercises for hip flexion to strengthen what people believe is strengthening psoas, which is not what it's really doing. But this is an example of an exercise with a cable trying to strengthen the hip flexion, to strengthen psoas is what people believe they're doing, when really they're just ruining their hip function. I find there's much better ways to do it than that. But if anyone who's had trouble, who has a weak psoas or weak just anterior part of the hip, and usually that would be with things like femoral acetabulum impingements, these type of exercises, if you wanted to really make it worse, then you could start doing these things, because what's really going on is when you're doing that, like, the psoas is not really a true hip flexor, it's more of a trunk stabilizer. So when you're doing these type of exercises in your attempts to strengthen the psoas, you're really just going to aggravate the iliacus and going to get like a ton of quadricep work, when really the problem with the hip joint itself not being centered is that the glutes are not resisting the pull. So if that's a centered, there's my femur in crap little picture here, but there's my hip joint. It should be in the center, but when I'm doing exercise like this, basically the muscles at the anterior side are basically going to be pulling it into the front of the hip. So instead of it centered, it's actually more at the front. So that's where you're going to get the grinding. That's where you get the hip impingement type stuff. So what really should be happening is the glutes should be resisting the pull of the anterior hip muscles, quadriceps and the TFL, and especially the iliacus, because that's really going to be the big problem. And it's and the more that people do these type of things and they become more quad dominant, the bigger the problem gets, and the harder it gets to get out of it. Eventually becomes very painful. So I tend to not like these exercises. If I want to strengthen the anterior hip, I'll just use things. I would do that towards the end of everything, by the way. I'd be spending more time with the hip hinge and using trying to get my better hip centration before I did that. But if I was going to do, I'd be using some squats and things like that. But the other exercise I see a lot in social media, this sort of garbage exercise, this again is another great way to just ruin hip function. Like you can see, like, it's impossible to really sit in a neutral position. So I'm already because my pelvis is rotated right under, all right, so because it's really difficult to sit up straight, I'd have to sit on a block. I don't have quite the flexibility to do it, but I can easily do this. But I can feel how my hip, even when I was doing just a handful of these, really getting pulled out to the front. I can't sit in a neutral position and do this effectively, and even if I could, why would I be doing it? Because it's so non-functional. I would never do that with a straight leg. I'd always have a bent knee. So the previous exercise is at least a better choice on that. But all this is going to do is just ruin the hip centration. You're going to have everything that I just spoke about a minute ago. All right, so really, like what I was saying, what we should be doing is spending more time with, if you've got hip problems, more time with trying to get the glutes to function in there, where you're going to have a better chance of centering the femur. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so I feel like I do this exercise in every video, but basically you just basic hip hinge or Romanian deadlift, and this is we're coming back to what we were speaking about before. Now my leg is almost in the exact same spot as before, but the difference is, instead of having the pull coming from the front, I've actually got the glutes and the hamstrings pulling it the other way. So the femur here is actually getting more work on the weaker, often inhibited side, and the quadriceps and the TFL and the iliacus are really prevented from doing much work here. So with enough repetition and good form, I can start to migrate this femur back into the position where it needed to be, and all the strength will return to my hip flexion without even doing hip flexion, because I've just centered the joint more effectively, so it doesn't crash, smash, or get pinched, or strain, and create all types of trigger points. I just have a better hip position to be able to do anything where I'm got this sort of hip flexion sort of action happening. All right, so this is why this action here. So instead of me lifting the hip, I'm just sort of, as you can see, I'm just extending the hip, but the position is identical. The finishing point is just like I should actually do a comparison video screenshot. So I'll do that so you can see it. Okay, so here's the two exercises compared to each other. So if we have a look at the deadlift, as I was saying just a second ago, like I've got all the glute action trying to center the femur. In this case, it's not quite identical, but you can see what I mean. So as that hip's coming into flexion, I probably needed to bend over a bit more here, but so if my trunk was a bit more there, but I'd end up getting this similar sort of angle. See how this trunk and hip angle here, they'll be very similar to each other. I just probably stood up a bit too straight on it, but basically, like the main difference is that this is not going to get centered if I've already got trouble, because all of these muscles are pulling it anteriorly. So I'm going to be the femur is sort of going to be heading there instead of heading there. So I'm just favouring on this side. I'm favouring it by getting all the weaker ones to do more of the work for me instead. All right. So if you're someone with no problem, maybe you could do the hip flexion thing, but I would ask why. You could just really get everything you want from sprinting, not putting an abnormal amount of loads into that area, just really playing with fire. Develop your strength through the anterior chain with like your lunges and your step ups and squats and more functional things where you've got like the glute hamstring reacting against it. It's never really good to work on that. A bit like for the shoulder, like working something specifically for pec minor to fix a shoulder problem, that would make no sense, because it's usually always a reason for the shoulder pain. You're usually trying to get rid of or prevent the pec minor from doing too much, and trying to get the other muscles, lower traps, and to get more involved. So very much the same type of problem in a different area. All right. So anyway, I hope that video gives you a bit of an insight as to why I don't like that particular exercise. And yeah, I'll try and follow it up with some other things about this, because it does get a bit messy. All right. But anyway, I hope that helps you out, and see you next time.